So it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to call our meeting to order. We are expecting Vicky to join us as our minute taker, but I don't see her yet. So Erin has agreed to take minutes for us, which is great. Before we do public comment, since we have so many folks here, which is fantastic, I thought it would be helpful, and we have some board members physically present and some online. So we'll just take a quick minute for board and administrator introductions. So Kevin, can you start?
Kevin Hansen, I represent Bristol.
Hi, I'm Barb Crandall. I represent Moncton.
Steve Rooney, I represent Starksboro. Brad Johnson, Starksboro.
Floyd Davison, business manager at MAUSD.
Katrina Napoli, assistant superintendent.
Introduce yourself if you could.
Hi guys, Justin representing Moncton.
I'm Krista Seringo. I represent Bristol.
Erin Dipner. I represent Bristol.
And Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Dash. So I couldn't be there in person today, but I also represent Bristol.
Kathy.
Kathy Upgar, New Haven.
Kristen.
Hi, this is Kristen Toy from Starksboro.
Beth.
Hi, this is Beth McGeorge, Director of Student Support Services.
And Patrick, I don't know if you're in reception and you can introduce yourself.
For the moment, I think so. Hi, everyone. Patrick Green, superintendent.
Okay, great. And Vicki was here. All right. Okay, so we're going to start with public comment. Just a few words from me before we get started. First, we're grateful you're here. As board members, I think we forget that it can be daunting to come to a formal meeting like this, and even more daunting to speak. So we also know that the structure of our meetings doesn't always present the most friendly and welcoming format. We're working on that. We're trying to find a way. We know that this structure is devised to meet legal requirements to ensure we can still get our work done in a sustainable amount of time. But we also want to respect, appreciate, acknowledge folks that do take the time to come to talk to us. So we've been trying a couple of different things, and tonight is another example of that. We recognize that sometimes folks come and we aren't expecting them to come, and sometimes they come with an issue that we might know they're going to be here in advance, and it's an issue that we might have heard at other times, and it's a big issue. And so that's why tonight we are trying to be more responsive. And after public comment, we're going to have some board discussion to give us a chance to reflect on what we hear. We don't always have the space to do that or create that space. So I think that while there are lots of folks here in support, that there are only a few people who have signed up to speak. So do you want to just call folks up by their name?
Yeah, you're on the top of the list.
Well, I'm actually on the top of the list.
And so if you could just introduce yourself and the town you represent.
My name is Patty Headley. Well, I don't know if I represent Bristol, but I live in Bristol. And I'm a retired school teacher. I used to teach at CBU High School, taught math. And I wanted to pass on this magazine that I've received from Southern Poverty Law Center out of Montgomery, Alabama. And they used to publish it under a different name, and I forget it. It's called Learning for Justice. So in addition to curriculum ideas, they can also help with workshops. And the last time I was here and spoke just a little bit, mentioning Equal Justice Initiative, and gave out that name and address. It's another organization that has great resources for, I think, K through 12 information, but I don't know, they may have pre-K ideas also. So in this too.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, I'm all set.
All right, thank you.
Then Alyssa Cobb.
Yeah.
So please all come behind us. Please come stand. If you're here to support anti-racist culture in our community, come and stand. You're a bit. Close, close, come in close, come in close, come in close, as close as you can get. Together, this is what community looks like. Come on, come on. Come in, come in, come in. Make room for everybody to get in here. Hi. We're back again. The first thing that we want to do, and maybe the most important thing that we want to do tonight, is to say thank you. Having a half an hour dedicated on your agenda to talk about how to build an anti-racist culture within our school systems is huge. We've been wanting this for a long time, and we are sincerely and completely grateful for this beginning. And our hope is that this becomes part of many meetings to come until someday trying to become anti-racist is actually how we are every day as human beings. So we thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Nakia to start tonight.
Hello, and thank you for having us, and thank you everyone who came. It's overwhelming and just so lovely to see everyone. Tonight I speak as a parent, an educator, and a community member. And as a parent, I speak from a place of sadness, frustration, and even sometimes anger. As a parent, I also speak from a place of hope and determination. I grew up in this community. This community has accepted me, educated me, supported me, and ultimately felt like the place I wanted to come back to so that I could raise my own children. And this community is our home. I really wasn't prepared for our children to be called the N-word at school, yet I should have been. I really wasn't prepared when a young boy in Moncton told our son that he couldn't play with him because he was too dark, yet I should have been. And to be clear, this isn't just about my children. This is the type of language, exclusion, and bigotry is happening to others as well in all of our schools. This request of the school board is about recognizing that we have an obligation to teach the children of our community a better way, a way that provides a seat at the table for each and every one of us. What we must know is that when it happens to anyone, it happens to everyone. We all hurt from and feel a sense of divisiveness when we fail to educate our community members to do better. As an educator, I know that we can make this happen. I know that this work so easily lends itself to our transferable goals and learning targets. I also know that teaching an anti-racist curriculum will help us to create the kind of people we want to turn free into the world upon graduation. Our goals are twofold. We are expressing our intentions to begin this important work at Bristol Elementary School. And we have a lot of us here from Bristol Elementary School, and thank you. And we are asking you to commit to administering this on a district level. We are asking you to support an implementation of age-appropriate anti-racist curriculums district-wide. We are asking you to plan for and support, financially and otherwise, our teachers and students so that these efforts surpass any one of our current positions. These efforts should be done consistently over time so that they become a part of who we are and what we do at each school each year. We appreciate that you have written the words in our ends policy, but now we are asking you to join us in taking action. Our ends policy lays the foundation for this work. We state that we are committed to equity and outcomes for each student so that a student's achievement of the ends is not limited or predetermined by characteristics such as race and ethnicity. Our objective number 1 states, but is not limited to, that students are able to succeed in an environment where race and ethnicity are not predictors of their academic success or their emotional well-being. We state that we will measure this objective with climate surveys that reflect that an increasing number of students feel welcome, included, and report a sense of agency in their learning. We also state an objective that all MAUSD students experience a sense of value and belonging at their school. In reading our ends policy, it seems perfectly clear what we need to do. While we appreciate best intentions simply won't do. We are asking for your commitment to provide the resources for our district and community so that we can truly shift to a culture that is a reflection of this policy. Thank you.
The ends policy also says the board is committed to equity and outcomes for each student so that students' achievement of the ends is not limited or predetermined by characteristics such as family economics, ethnicity, race, religion, class, geography, disability, language, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or initial proficiencies. And I just want to say, when you're having these discussions, remember that race needs to stand apart from all the other isms that are listed in that sentence. It is a completely different animal. It is a system that all of us here grew up embedded in. It is embedded in us, good white people. We need to become anti-racist racists, if you would. So it's a separate thing. It's a whole bigger deal, because what if you have a gender difference and you're also Black? It adds a whole different layer to all the other isms. So please elevate it to something as more monumental in many ways than many of the other isms. We are standing here tonight, all of us are standing here tonight to thank you for what you're starting to do this evening. We ask you to stand by your commitment as stated in the ends. We ask you to establish the foundational curriculum through grades 1 through 12, on which our graduates can one day stand together and create and sustain a true anti-racist culture. We ask you to fund the education of faculty, staff, administration, and all leadership so that this foundational curriculum can begin to grow and flourish. And Patrick Green, I can't see your face, but we are asking you to take daily action to ensure that the words of the ends document become a reality as soon as possible. It was about 3 years ago that a few of us started coming to the Community Engagement Committee meeting with a plea to end racism in our schools. 3 years ago. So we're now going to, in honor of that, and in honor of the transition between us all standing here tonight and you having a very important discussion to follow, we're going to stand in 3 minutes of silence, 1 minute for each year that we've been waiting for what's happening tonight on your agenda. Jennifer? Tell us when to start. Start. All right. We thank you for letting us be here tonight. Thank you for your receptiveness. Thank you for putting it on the agenda. Thank you, everybody. Everybody, give yourselves a hand for standing up. If there's anybody here that would like to be notified of future things that you can do, like come and stand, we have a clipboard. I'm gonna give it back to Fred right here, Fred Danforth. You can find him, put your email on it, and you will be. To come and.
We have one more speaker, actually, Sally Burrow.
Okay.
Is on the list.
And we also want to say that you can stay if you want to listen to the board discussion. Thanks, everybody.
And to listen to Sally.
Sally, yeah.
Hi. Just yesterday I was asked to read this from another parent. I'm not a parent. Someone else who's a parent, just three. And I'm not gonna read the first couple of pages, I'm just gonna go to the last two paragraphs. The first couple. Okay, the first couple pages is about missed opportunities by authorities regarding racial issues that have ended in devastating results, and that's kind of the beginning of it. And then at the end, it says, what authorities do really matters, whether they be teachers or parents, political candidates, or school administrators. The ability to solve large systemic problems may be complicated and difficult. And fortunately, we have the power right now to do the right thing on a community level. It's easy to become mired in the status quo and sometimes difficult to admit ugly truth. We cannot ignore that all children should have, at the very least, the right to attend school without fear of isolation. One way to provide that is to take the issue of discrimination seriously and implement anti-racism training and education, including culture studies taught by those with authentic cultural perspectives. Thank you for listening. Dan Tabor. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. The letter.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes, thank you.
That's
Leave
what I'm gonna
anything
do.
that you want me to.
There are two of them here. And more could be emailed, so I don't forget about them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Elisa mentioned that we're going to have a conversation. We have to do one quick bit of procedural business that'll take like 2 minutes or so. And then we're going to have a discussion as a board, but we absolutely welcome and encourage you to stay. I'll talk a little bit more about what that process is going to be in a moment, but if you do intend to stay, I would encourage you to grab an index card and a pen so that although this is a conversation that will take place at the board table, we'd still love to know what you're thinking about or questions you have as you listen to our discussion. So, all right, so we'll move on. And also just wanted to say that I was reminded of the power of silence. So thank you. Okay, so we are going to have a motion to approve our agenda. May I have a motion, please? Barb, and a second? Aaron. Okay, all those in favor of, oh, actually, I have a brief discussion about that. So we're going to, after we have our conversation, after the consent agenda, we'll see what our time is like, but we are going to stop at 7 p.m. Shifting the agenda around a little bit to make sure that we can hear from the folks from the Hannaford Career Center at 7 o'clock and be respectful of their time. And then we'll go back to the order of what's remaining on the agenda. Any other comments or questions about the agenda? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Steve, and a second?
Second.
Justin. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the consent agenda passes. Okay, so we're going to move into our discussion about race, identity, and inclusion in MAUSD. So excuse my tickle in my throat. For those that are sticking around, this is going to be like a fishbowl exercise. And I don't know if you've ever participated in that. But we're doing it this way because we as board members, we can really only talk to each other at a designated meeting. And we have this great opportunity where we've heard from community members, and we want to set aside time for this body to have that conversation amongst ourselves, which we can only do in this space. But as I was mentioning before with the index cards, I recognize that that limits your participation in this moment. I hope that we will continue to have many more conversations where we can invite your participation in other ways. This is just one of many dialogues I hope we have. But because this is a conversation that we're going to have amongst ourselves, I invite you, as you think about what you heard during public comment or what's coming up from the board discussion, to please jot down the thoughts you want to share with us, the questions you have, anything that's on your mind. If there are specific questions, then we will do our best to get a response to you in a timely manner, if you let us know your contact info. Let's see. So for board members, because this is such an important and sensitive topic, I have a couple of requests. The first is that we close our computers and make sure our phones are off. And then I'd also like to briefly review some conversation agreements that you might recall from when we had our board retreat in August, and they come from courageous conversations about race. And I'll just read them to you. And I think these hopefully will ground us in our discussion in a way that is productive and that we can all participate in. So the first one is to stay engaged. And that means being present emotionally, intellectually, and socially in the dialogue. The second is to experience discomfort. So this norm acknowledges that discomfort is inevitable, especially when we're speaking about race, and that we're making a commitment to bring these issues out into the open despite that discomfort. The third is to speak your truth. So being open and honest about your own feelings and not what you think other people want to hear. And the fourth is to expect and accept non-closure. So we're going to hang out in uncertainty, not rush to quick solutions, especially in relation to racial understanding. This is, as I said before, an ongoing conversation. So are folks comfortable with those agreements? Anything that you want to add? Okay. All right, so I thought what we would do, because we heard a lot during public comment, and we might all process that in different ways, I thought it might help if we first just had time to turn to your neighbor. And for folks online, you're going to do some of your own just internal reflection first. But I wanted to give us all a chance to reflect before we talk as a group. So first turn to your neighbor and share your reactions to what you heard. So I'll give everybody, so what we'll do is have this try to be an equitable sharing protocol where for Kevin and Barb, for example, Barb will speak for 2 minutes and Kevin, you're just going to listen. And then Kevin, you're going to speak and Barb is just going to listen. And then we'll go to the next question. Okay, so if folks want to pair up, Floyd, would you like to come on up and join the conversation? And do we have an odd number? We'll get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So do you guys want to be a 3? Okay. So. Oh. You're in a fishbowl. I know. So what we're saying. Yeah.
This is what we need. Is that your question? Yeah. This is.
Same here. I don't know if we can describe that people that get some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's in the time frame, anybody.
You should be switching if you haven't already. Okay, folks. Just want to have you have a chance to think about two other questions, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that in your pairs, and then we'll come back as a group. The next two questions, and I'm giving them to you at the same time because I don't know how long they're going to take. I'd like you to have a conversation about what came to mind when you saw the topic race, identity, and inclusion on the agenda. And then also, what questions does that being on the agenda or did hearing public comment raise for you? So what were your reactions when you saw this on the agenda, and what questions did this conversation raising for you? So try to do that equitable sharing protocol again, and I'll give you guys 4 more minutes. So we know about it.
When I saw it, so that's my problem. How do we define the problem?
with this. I'm happy to see you.
Could just put it right there. Yeah, thank you. Feel free to take the top off.
How do you define?
Okay.
Where I would define success in dealing with it. Because you still have that same group that doesn't live in your head. I just. And that kid will be on will that define your life? Yeah.
Yeah, I was. I thought it was second famous.
We have about a minute left. I mean,
There's always been a worst part.
that was time. Are folks ready to, do you need a few more minutes or you guys feeling pretty good? Okay, online friends who've been thinking on your own, I think we're gonna come back to the group. And Vicky, I'm so glad you're here and I hope you can capture this part of the discussion for us. Thank you. Okay. All right, so I just want to open it up. We have about 15 minutes or so. I just want to open it up and start with asking what reactions and thoughts came up in your conversation with your partner, or for the folks online, in your own reflection. The reactions or thoughts?
I'm brave enough.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that around the table and in the room, you know, there's not a whole lot of disagreement about how important and intractable this kind of issue is. And I guess what I feel personally is I feel somewhat empowered in some respects that so many people from the community showed up here tonight, to express their, their interest in the issue and their passion for doing something about it. Because at the end of the day, without this kind of community support, I'm not sure the board has a whole lot of power to end racism in the district. Yeah, we can tweak the curriculum, we can take best practices, we can throw more resources at it, but if we don't have community support for that, kind of change, then I think we would be destined to fail. So that's kind of, my thinking about it.
My sense is that I frankly need, like we did a nice presentation the other day on the math curriculum. I would need to probably get my head more into exactly what it is we're currently doing. Compare that to what people suggest is the best practice on that front, and see what the difference in resources and personnel might be to try to move things in one direction or another. Before I could really speak to, where we can raise this or what level to put it at in our list of priorities. So I need more education.
I agree with Steve.
Excuse me, could you all speak up just a little bit? Or a lot?
Well, okay. I agree with Steve. I think, I find it hard to believe, even though we're not talking in the weeds with the administration, but I find it hard to believe that we are doing nothing. And I get the impression from the discussion tonight that we're doing nothing. So I think it's important that we understand what we're doing, assuming we're doing something. As Steve discussed, and then do a comparison. I also thought it was interesting that there was a comment about things are happening at Bristol Elementary, which I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. But I'm struggling a little bit why we're siloing that activity, as opposed to, and it goes to the issue of having 4 elementary schools, and even though you think everything's equal, it's not. As to how we can, or why we aren't trying to, whatever it is we're doing at Bristol, rolling with the other 3 elementary schools.
Mike?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. And thanks for everybody for showing up and for sharing their thoughts with us tonight. As I was thinking about this alone on Zoom, it seemed to me that there were a couple of challenges that we face as a district that are both intertwined and maybe somewhat dissociable. And this was brought to my mind when you brought up the sort of ends policies. On the one hand, there's sort of a sense that we want sort of academic opportunity that is the same for all of our students, right? That every student can achieve academic excellence. And so on the one hand, there's sort of an academic component. And then as I hear the public comment tonight, I think also about the really important sort of social or developmental components of anti-racist efforts. And so for me, the sort of tension that I'm rolling around is trying to understand how do we address both of those, which because they ultimately are intertwined, right? If there's good development, then there's potential for academic success. At the same time, I think there are policies that we have in place in the district that I've started to get a sense of that are maybe more directed to one or the other. And so maybe thinking about how we sort of combat both academic and social and developmental in a more holistic way might be a way that we might be able to meet some of the really important concerns that have been addressed tonight.
What were some other things that came up when you were talking with your partner? Partners, in some cases.
I was happy to see this on the agenda. You asked about what, what our reaction was to having it on the agenda, so. I knew after, the last presentation that, it was a topic of discussion that we needed to have, and. So I'm glad we made room for it.
Other folks online?
I think I was really, really touched by the audience tonight and the sharing that went on, and very grateful for everyone that came tonight. But where my mind went was, I'm more concerned about the people who are not at the table with us, and what can we do as an educational institution to bring everybody to the table to talk about this in a respectful tone that will result in positive outcomes for all of our children.
What other questions did this public comment session or your conversation or individual reflection, what other questions did this raise for you? Some have already been brought up. What other ones might you have?
Well, I think, following one of Steve's comments is to get, as a board to have a good handle on what actually is being done. And Kevin raised this to what actually is being done in the district. And then, maybe having an ALN type presentation by the, by the administration, which would allow the board to evaluate what kinds of, what might be the sources of best practices, and how, what is currently being done can be adjusted and tweaked in a productive way.
Kristen?
Yeah, I feel the same way that with the points that Steve had brought up, where we would definitely need to have an understanding of what is being presented and taught to our students right now, and also recognizing that this needs to be addressed right away. But in order to do something about it right away, I think we do need to have an understanding of what's being taught and the messages that are being put out there, and then figure out how to collaborate with the other, all four of the schools in the district, so that there's a consistent message being delivered, and think bigger picture, for future. I feel like it's going to be an evolving conversation over time, unfortunately, but that's kind of the sad reality where we are.
Yeah, I agree with, I for one would love to be more informed. I feel like I'm playing catch up a lot because of my timing on the board. I haven't been here that long, but I also feel like this is a great opportunity for collaboration between you and us, and the power of collaboration. And I think we all saw the power of the silence. Everybody was uncomfortable with the 3 minutes that went by. We weren't able to look at each other, and it was heavy for 3 minutes. 3 years was a long time. I know there are a lot of really great resources out there. But it's a lot of work to put together curriculums, and we obviously need financial support. The board either has to agree to, everybody work together. And I think it's just gonna take a lot for all of us to kind of come together, but the work can be done, and it can be done within a fair amount of time if it's supported. So there it is. It needs to be supported.
Mike?
Or yeah, just to add on, and I really appreciate the past couple of comments, right? I think this idea of collaboration is really key. I also think the idea of understanding sort of broadly what the district is doing currently is really useful. But I do want to sort of temper that a little bit in the sense that we as a board are not in a position where we dictate curriculum or details of how this is going to be implemented, right? We really come in to set goals and ends and perhaps need to, and then monitor them and assess whether they're being met. And so with that, when I think about collaboration, I think thinking about ways that we as a board and we as a board with the community at large can maybe set more defined goals, really be specific about what our sort of stepping stones might look like towards achieving sort of an anti-racist education and towards, you know, providing the kinds of resources that our educators and our students need to move along that path. So really thinking about what those goals look like, I think is really important. And I think we probably can't do that alone. And public comment has shown us that there's a lot of wonderful resources and individuals who are committed to helping make that come to fruition. And then the last one would be once we have those really clear goals, I think that that'll allow the board to do a better job of being really direct in our assessment of our progress more broadly. Right. So rather than thinking about like what are the specific resources that we need our school to implement, I think it's really we need to know what those stepping stones can look like in terms of progress, and then how we're really going to evaluate that, because I think that that's really the only real capacity that we as a board have in this context.
Steve and then Kevin.
Yeah, and so, you know, to back up what I was saying about needing to be educated about it, you know, I don't want to be educated about the nitty gritty of it. I want to be educated about what level we're implementing a program now, what resources the administration might think they need. You know, what resources from the board in terms of time and money, personnel, if they felt that there was a disparity in what is offered now versus what could be done. So the board can basically look at the resource allocation and say, all right, this resource, along with everything else that we need resources for, how do we prioritize that? And that's really our job. How do we prioritize, you know, what we need for any of our curriculum? And what are we placing the emphasis on in our goals, so that we know, does this take away from something else we're doing, because you know our resources are finite. So that's the reason why I want to be educated. I want to just understand kind of what is the lift, if there is one, and how can we prioritize what that lift will take over what else, you know, everything else we're expected to do.
Steve said it, but I think,
Did
I think, you know, Mike's absolutely right that we don't want to get in the weeds, but every once in a while, we do like pull the curtain back a little bit to have a presentation, and for all the good reasons that Steve indicated. You know, I believe there's a big vacuum here that when we don't understand and pry a little bit into the nuts and bolts, whether it comes through a presentation or what, there's there's a vacuum, there's silence, so then you can, make all sorts of assumptions, if you will, so. The level that, I mean, Steve said it very well, some level of, presentation. So that we can understand, what we're doing, where we should be going, that sort of thing is pretty important, I think, at this point, because hopefully that would answer a lot of questions, or fill a lot of gaps and assumptions.
I think too, as we're thinking about moving into a new, what am I blanking on this?
Strategic plan.
Thank you, strategic plan, that we could come up with this sense of what are the really core values of MAUSD. And if this inclusion and anti-racism stuff is bubbling so far as it has been, as we see today, maybe any further work on the strategic plan or upcoming work on that really needs to incorporate all that language so that we're not just saying we're doing that, but we're really incorporating it from top to bottom of what we're looking at.
Go ahead, Steve.
I think also to touch base on what Brad was saying about community support. This problem is not just within our schools. I'm sure we know that this problem exists on a broader scope out in the general community. I think we're fortunate where we live that it's only as bad as it is. It could be worse. I'm not making excuses or pardoning anything that goes on. I'm simply saying we have a supportive community here. I think we have a supportive board, and I think we're interested in doing this work. There are a lot of places where that might not be the case. So that's what's heartening, is that we have community support for this, and hopefully that weight moves not just the school community, but can move the broader community where those problems lie outside of the school's control.
Barbara, you going to say something?
No, well, I wasn't, but I will. I am curious. I know this is a big part of what's going on in Bristol. I love to know and hope and know that our other schools are as supportive of this kind of work. And I don't know that as a representative from Moncton, I don't know what my constituents are thinking. And I'm hoping that we can bring this to them if they're not here. I hope you're here.
Trying to hold silence in case other thoughts bubble up.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
It's a great question. Where do we go from here?
I think it gets back to the point, is you have some more information about what exactly is being utilized in our system. That would be the next step in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely heard it pretty clear multiple times, folks wanting to know what's currently happening and also wanting to know what the best practices are to see where there might be a gap. So that seems like a good action step, as does this idea of thinking about measurable goals.
I think it's important that we get the right people at the table for conversation. You know, I would say that in this room, there is 100% agreement that this is a problem we need to be better about. I would say that in our school community, we have a model in front of us with students embracing an LGBT world with far more acceptance. And I would say that if we brought our students into this, that would do far more than any of the adults in this room will do.
That would have been interesting to have our students.
I didn't hear that last.
Steve just said it would have been,
Yeah,
he said it would have been great to have our student representative here. We have a student representative to the school
Ah.
board. Well, we just have just a few more minutes. And I think we have some idea of next steps. And I would just add a couple of things. In addition to knowing what we're doing, I think it's helpful for us to know how we're doing currently. And it's hard with, in Vermont with small sample sizes of populations of folks to really tease out data by identity group without revealing personal information. So sometimes we look to statewide data, but we do also have local assessments that can help us get a sense of how we're doing currently. And, some of those we might see included in kids who are struggling due to bias around identity, not just BIPOC students, but also LGBTQ plus students as well. And so I think one of the things that was in my mind when during public comment, I think Elisa had said that, really sort of separating it out and really focusing on race. I guess for me, I believe an anti-racist curriculum lifts all people. Sort of like universal design winds up being beneficial to everyone. And so I really think that having that framework would help us to move the needle for all kids in important ways. And so I think it's important for us to look at how our students are doing right now, especially those students who are on the margins because of their identity, and what we're doing now as we think about next steps. Any other last thoughts? Or thoughts for right now, because they won't be last thoughts. All right. Thanks, folks, for being really flexible, and thank you for hanging around and listening and sharing your time with us. Appreciate it. Feel free to bring your index cards and grab a chocolate, or 3 or 5. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay, as soon as we settle back down, we're gonna have the Hannaford Career Center folks do their presentation. So I'm gonna actually put the presentation. So I have to share this. Mike, you can't see the presentation on the screen, right? Yeah.
Don and Leanne and asked them if they would send it out. I don't think they would. You have to do. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Sure, just letting you have your transition.
Yeah. Give it a minute for folks to. That would be great. Thanks, Erin.
I don't feel so formal. Well, and maybe I don't know. Here it is. I
Okay, so we are joined this evening by Nicole McTavish from the Hannaford Career Center, the newly appointed superintendent. And she is here to share with us an update on how things are going there, what they're thinking about in the Career Center. Just gonna move this. And I'm gonna get it so we can see your screen. There we go. But I might have moved ahead on you. Okay. All right. So I will turn it over to you. Thanks for being with us.
I'm Nicole McTavish. I am the new superintendent of the Patricia Hannaford Regional Technical School District. I come here by way of the Marshall Islands. I lived in the Marshall Islands for the last 2 years. Previous to that, I was on the West Coast mostly. I worked in Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And also did a stint overseas working in Stuttgart, Germany. We were a military family for a long time. Then my husband retired, and since that time we've been moving around as my son has grown, and I've taken different positions across the United States and overseas. So my passion has always been CTE, and I can't be more thrilled to be here at the Hannaford Center. It really is the sweet spot of education. I feel very lucky to be able to bring this kind of education to kids. So I never really know who the audience is for a presentation like this, or what your knowledge base already is. So some of these things you probably already know, and some, if you're new to the board, you may not know. So please feel free to ask questions along the way too.
So just tell me when you're ready for me to click.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Please. So the first thing I just wanted to do is talk about what we are. So what do we offer at the Hannaford Center? We offer all kinds of programs, from traditional sort of hands-on programs to really high-tech programs like our high-tech manufacturing or healthcare programs, our engineering and architecture programs. We also do everything from industrial type programs to healthcare, all across the board. So these are the programs we currently offer at the Hannaford Center that students are in right now. Yes. So also just trying to talk about, why is CTE so necessary? Why is this an important part of the sort of holistic experience that our kids get to have? For Vermont in particular, and for Addison County, CTE is going to be critical to the economic future of us having a community, and for us to have the income and drivers and services that we need to have the community that we need to support our families. So by 2040, the economic drivers indicate that we're going to need 10,000 more workers just to do what we do now because of the level of people retiring from industries. Right now, Addison County has a 1.6% unemployment rate, which means that every single graduate that we have, if we could possibly keep them in Addison County, that would be good for our county. The other thing that we know about CTE funding, pro technical education funding, is it used to be hugely and richly supported by the federal government, but that has dried up significantly over the past 10, 20 years. I'll tell you that when I was a high school principal about 15 years ago, I actually got more money from the federal government and Perkins grants from my high school that had 3 classes than I get for the Career Center now that serves 400 kids. So that's the extent of the difference between what federal funding used to look like and what it looks like now. The other thing which is interesting about that slide, you don't have to go back, is in all of Vermont right now, we have 650,000 people in the population, and we only have 340,000 housing units. I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody here who knows how hard it is to find a house. But in 2022, only 2,300 housing permits were pulled in all of Vermont. So that's showing you that the need is not being met
And it certainly won't be met if we are not graduating more graduates that can do construction and trades and build houses for us. The next piece is just how effective CTE is. There's an old myth, and sometimes we still are hearing it in communities, that CTE is sort of someplace to go if, you know, a kid just wants to work with their hands, or a kid is not enjoying K-12 or whatever. But we know from data, real hard data, over 20 years worth of data, that CTE graduates actually outperform their K-12 peers in almost every indicator. 93% of our CTE graduates go on graduate, compared to 80% is the national average. 91% of our kids that are graduate with college credits in hand. And the indicator of kids going on to college, if they have college credits in hand, is huge. They've already got some. They very often go to the college where they earn those credits and continue in those programs. And then 94% of our grads enter the workforce or post-secondary right away. So they aren't doing a gap year. They're not sort of figuring out what they're going to do. They go straight on to that next thing because they have had that time in CTE to find their passion, to connect with what they want to do, and then go on into that. The other piece is CTE is our future, especially here in Vermont, especially in Addison County. So as you probably know, Vermont has the second highest level of age, right? We're the second oldest state in the nation. And that's really intensifying the labor shortage that we're feeling. Anybody who's tried to hire, I know when I'm trying to hire right now, it's really hard to hire positions. In fact, you might have seen, actually just 3 days ago on NPR, they did a report on this in Vermont, and also in the New York Times. There's a clip there in the top right corner. The New York Times was calling Vermont the face of the labor shortage, right? Oh, so the other thing we know about Addison County and in Vermont is we have a lot of active farms, but the active farms are 30% of them are led by people who are over the retirement age and are really hoping to turn that the family farm or the farm that they have. They're really counting on the next generation. And that's one of the things that we do at Hannaford. The other thing, which was a surprising statistic to many people, is that Vermont actually is one of the biggest exporters of manufactured goods and the highest high-tech exported goods. Addison County is full of small and large high-tech manufacturing firms, making everything from the tiniest little pieces of medical equipment to avionics like Collins. So the high-tech manufacturing is what we are really leaning into right now through a series of grants, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but it really is important for the future of Addison County.
So that doesn't mean we're not like exporting the most number of high-tech goods. We're producing high-tech exports.
We are producing, right?
Okay.
So, because when you're talking about manufacturing in particular, manufacturing covers any number of things, right? Food production is manufacturing, metal work is manufacturing, woodworking, like maple works that makes the kids' toys, that's manufacturing. Textiles can be manufacturing, ceramics can be manufacturing. So in our case, there's actually quite a lot of high-end electronic manufacturing and high-end metal working and manufacturing, which is happening in Addison County. So this slide is just kind of meant to show your district, right? What percentage of your kids get the opportunity to come take a career technical education class. And obviously our goal is that every student in Addison County gets at least one opportunity to come and take a CTE class over their high school career. Even if they don't end up going into that field, having that experience of getting to learn something new, getting to learn a trade, getting to learn how that works in the world is really valuable to a kid. So for example, what we've done here is what is the head count? So the school board often looks at head count and FTE, right? FTE is a full student for a full day. Head count can be almost anything. For us, we have many kids that are not at our center for a full day. They're there for either half a day or maybe a quarter of a day. And so those are counted differently than FTE. So we decided to do head count because those are children, right? We can understand what a child is. So you can see the percentage of the students from your population, which this year are having the opportunity to take a class. So this is just the same data kind of presented in another way to get the idea of how many students are having the opportunity to take a CTE class. And CTE also, as you might know, has many embedded credits. It's by state statute in Vermont that many of our CTE classes also earn in academic classes. Many of the classes earn either a science credit, a math credit, an English credit, or an art credit.
So your students can do both of those things while sitting in the same classroom.
Sometimes you even get a college credit.
Many of them, in fact, it's actually, we're at the beginning of a process by which in a few years, it's required that students have the opportunity to earn a college credit. It is awesome. We've been really fortunate at the Career Center too, because I know that enrollment is a big concern and issue everywhere right now, but our enrollment, we're not on a straight up projectile, but we have been incrementally increasing. We are hoping, we have a brand new administration. We're doing a lot of marketing. We're getting out and explaining to our communities what we are and what we offer and how great it is for kids. And we're hoping that we continue to invite students and to experience these classes. The next piece is I just wanted to make sure that as I'm talking to boards, you understand that we're not just asking for your money. We're working really very hard to earn our own money. So one of the things we do is we apply for a lot of grants. And we've been very successful with applying for Department of Labor federal grants, mostly through the support of Senators Leahy and Sanders. They've been very good to the center. So far, we have won $100,000 grant in partnership with Collins Aerospace, where we are putting together a high-tech manufacturing, both a 912 program and also an adult education program. Right now, we are training our staff to be able to be a train the trainer model of one of the highest level certifications of a particular kind of soldering that you need in manufacturing that Collins needs very badly to make the parts that they do in their avionics. So that's going to be pretty special. We're going to be advertising that. Stay tuned. And we also are in the middle of applying for a $550,000 grant from Senator Leahy. And we have been told that as long as we do the application correct, then we will be getting that grant. So it's not guaranteed, but it's pretty much guaranteed. This is something that we're expecting to get it this year. Then the other piece is just the federal funding, the Perkins money, which I explained earlier, which is the money that comes directly from the federal government. That accounts for about $120,000. It's a competitive grant that we write each year and in concert with other CTE centers in the state of Vermont. Then just taking a look at our total budget, you've probably seen these, as a school board that the largest chunk of your budget goes directly to salary and benefits. And for us, the other piece that we have that comes directly off the top is our debt service. So we had a bond, which remodeled our building over the course of last year. And that was desperately needed. Our building was built in 1971 and hadn't had any modifications or renovations since that time. So you can imagine 20,000 students have gone through the building since 1971. In 1971, Nixon was the president. We were in the Vietnam War and Archie Bunker was debuting. So this has been a long time since our building had not a roof, not an infrastructure, not HVAC, not air handling, nothing. So the remodel wasn't sexy, but it got all of that done. And we repainted and we put new flooring in, and the building looks very nice for kids now and is a safe and orderly and mold-free space for kids to participate in. So I hope you have the opportunity to come and do a tour. It's really very exciting. It's really exciting to see the space cleaned up for the kids. And then this is this year, what we consider the preliminary budget. So you saw the 24 and then the 25 year in total budget. And both of those years are budget for salary, benefit, and debt service accounts for 86% of our budget. And then the rest are the pieces, dues, debts, supplies, travel, advertising, property services, repairs, all those sorts of things. So then we start talking about what does that mean for our next year process? So as you know, this time of year, this is like, I don't even know how many varies to put about being very preliminary. But from the information we have in front of us right now, our local assessment piece for next year, so this is the fiscal year 25 budget, the one that we're all building right now, is 19,894 for the local assessment, with 11,365 coming from the state for a total tuition rate of 31,259. And remember, that's per FTE now, not per student. So each child doesn't cost $31,000 each. That's proportional depending on how much of that student spends at our building. Students spend any place from 0.25 at our building to all the way to 1.0. The only 1.0 students we have though are our culinary arts program. All the rest are generally half. So 0.5 FTE, so half of 31,000. So fiscal year 25, go ahead.
So fiscal year 25, that's next year is the 31,000. Fiscal year 24, this year, that's the 26,900. So the change is the 4,350. So what's driving that? The same things that are driving your budget. Premiums for healthcare have dramatically increased. We're expecting a 16% increase, and that's a really big thing when that's 86% of your budget. The other thing which happened with us is we have a pretty young staff, and we also have a number of staffs who are having major life changes. And so we're having a lot of staff opt into health insurance that previously weren't in health insurance. And when you have a staff of less than 40, any one of them makes a very big difference. We also, you're experiencing the same thing with your visit premiums. They're increasing by 9%. That's a big chunk for us. The other thing which is going on with our budget is during the fiscal year 23, there was a fund balance, and the choice was made to use that fund balance to cover a big portion of the fiscal year 24 school year budget, which artificially deflated the tuition for 1 year, but that was one-time money and now it's gone. And so now we don't have that to do to deflate the tuition rate for fiscal year 25. So that's now we're at the real cost of tuition. So the total increase is 10.69%. And I think, and just as a sort of a closing, CTE is expensive. It's far more expensive to run a machine shop than it is to buy English textbooks. I was an English teacher. I loved getting new textbooks, but they didn't cost $500,000 for one textbook like a Haas machine costs. And most CTE programs are expensive. There are also a lot of safety concerns, so you have to have a higher ratio of staff to students in CTE programs. So while it is more expensive to run CTE programs, it's definitely worth it. Our county needs it, our students need it, our communities need it, and the kids definitely need it. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I also have my business manager here, so if there's a very technical question, she can help us out.
And for those who don't know,
Oh,
Kim Farnham is the board chair at the Career Center, and she's also our community at-large rep member from Monade.
You're still active, right?
I'm still on the board.
Yes.
Yeah. Nicole, you might just touch base on, for folks who don't know, what grade levels?
Oh, great. Yeah. So we only serve high school and then adult learners. So we serve grades 9 and 10, mostly in what they call pre-technical classes, which are shorter and more survey type classes. And then what we call technical classes are what our 11th and 12th graders take, which are very focused on a particular trade or skill. And then we also have adult learning at the center. So community members who want to come in and improve their skill set in their field. For example, if they want to learn phlebotomy, or oftentimes we'll do certificates like a truck driving certificate or a tractor driving certificate, or we're going to be doing the soldering certificate or a manufacturing CNC certificate or an auto certificate. So adult learners from the community pay a tuition, or oftentimes are brought by their company or have earned a scholarship through a fund to come and take an adult learning course. So we do that as well. Both things. And it is also a thing in Vermont, which is really unique and I think great, that an adult learner can also take a daytime class if they want. They have to pay a small tuition fee to do that. But we sometimes have adult learners in our culinary program in particular.
I noticed that Otter Valley has just a few participants. Do they have other opportunities someplace else?
Yeah, Otter Valley is their sending district would be Stafford Technical
Oh,
Center.
right.
But Stafford, as you might know, is full and actually has to turn students away. So we are hoping to help with that. Right now, there hasn't been a focused effort on those students, which is why we only have 3 or 4. And those are usually in our agriculture program because Stafford doesn't have the same program. So what we don't want to do is compete with them. What we do want to do is partner so that kids have opportunities. So we're beginning talks with them right now about the programs they don't have at all. Can we see if we can get kids to them? And then any program where they're turning children away, we're hoping to be able to serve them. The turning kids away is always a bad deal. Yeah.
Our Mount Abe numbers looks like about 20%. Is that, maybe you know this, Katrina, is that where we usually hover as far as participation?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we've had ups and downs, much like your line graph, but
Yeah, and I'm brand new, so I'm hoping to, I've met Patrick in a few different opportunities, but I haven't had the chance to really sit down and talk with you all about how we can partner and what barriers. I know generally the barriers identified by students are schedule, right?
Yeah.
That's almost always what they say.
Yeah.
So we're working really closely right now with Addison Central and hope to work really closely with you too. Yeah.
Well, from our personal experience for our daughter, one of the barriers we didn't anticipate was more in terms of what colleges are looking for. And it's a bummer because we're trying so hard in Vermont to really encourage students to focus on personalized learning and individualized learning opportunities and do the things they really love and can do well. And then there are these requirements of however many years of whatever it is that are hard to meet. When you're splitting your time, and it's like the colleges need to catch up a little bit.
They do,
and how they're viewing applicants. What they bring as far as their academic coursework.
I think so. And one thing that Vermont seems to be very good at and continues to add to the list is this cross-crediting, right? Where if a student is in, for example, mechanical science, they are also earning a science credit.
That's hugely helpful.
It is very, and I will say the AOE is doing very well at that.
Yeah.
And also individual districts, like we currently have worked with you all about a certain student who needed an English credit and how can we partner to help make that happen.
Yeah.
So the collaboration has been really good too.
I can't see the folks online so well, but I think I can tell if anyone has questions, you can raise your hand, or anyone else here have other questions or thoughts for Nicole or her team. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you all enjoy the holiday break.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before I leave, if you don't mind, my daughter graduated from here.
Yeah.
She took the design illustration program with Lisa Rager.
Yeah.
I'm still teaching it. And she went on to pursue a graphic design degree at Drexel. The every program she was introduced to as a freshman, Lisa had already introduced them to. She was teaching her classmates how to do these programs. So when we, look at different faculty members and so on, they are industry ready. That's a key piece that she found when she went to Drexel, how she was like, wow, Mom, I already know this stuff. The other piece is the connection with the alumni. We really feel working on that a little bit more to have them come back and say, what did your journey look like?
Yeah.
And I know on the board here, which I was on a few years ago, we did the same thing with alumni from here. And I think it found very helpful to find out how they got where they went. And it just allows the public to say, you know what, you don't have to go through college. You can go to a training program in Ohio or wherever you need to go. And my daughter just moved on from graphic design and is doing marketing, working for an international company on how to set up home businesses. So that after COVID, learning how to do that. But they're out there and it's fun to have them come back and talk about, the Career Center, which I love very, very much. And it's a little diamond in the community that we have the ladies in charge now. So we're working on that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. All right.
I have to
Next,
stay for the whole meeting.
what's that?
We had a meeting last night.
Take some chocolate with you on your way out. Pushing the chocolate.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Happy holidays.
You too. Thank you.
So next on our agenda is an action to appoint a new Moncton rep, and so I'd love to invite Kylie Hilland.
Right.
Yes, to the table. Come on up.
So this was a great evening for her.
I was gonna text Bill. You didn't tell me there was gonna be 100 people here.
Yes, I know.
We'll connect
That was-
later on my first day.
It was my first.
Oh,
meeting.
yes,
It was like
I-
the same people, just
Maybe
was
not as
smaller,
quite as many.
smaller.
Yeah,
It's
right.
about a third.
You're right.
Yeah.
It
You're
was
right.
Marty.
We
at
have a
Market Night
horrible
Thursday.
habit of
Hi,
introducing
Kylie.
people.
Yep.
We have.
And you stayed.
Yeah. Well, nice to meet you.
So I see Vicky, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yes, could I have the spelling of Kylie's name, please?
ahead.
Kielee.
Kielee, and your last name?
Eelland.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Eelland.
Belland.
P as in Paul.
P, okay. Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, so before we chat with Kylie, we need an action for this appointment, and then we'll have a discussion.
So moved, Aaron.
And a second,
I'll second it.
Barb. Okay, so welcome. We did post this opening on Front Porch Forum and let the select board know. And Kylie was the only person who expressed interest. So this would be to complete Bailey's term, since she had to leave because of a conflict of interest sooner than her term was up. And by appointing Kylie, she didn't need, within 30 days, she wouldn't need to go collect petition signatures and have a special vote and all of that good stuff. So you will still need to run, I believe. No. Yes, in March? Yes, okay. So this is a stopgap measure, and hopefully you'll decide to run and be on the ballot in March, which means getting signatures pretty soon now to get on the ballot. So
I think it's January 15th. Something like that. Yeah, it's in January.
But maybe first we can just start by having you introduce yourself and telling us a little bit about your interest.
Yeah. So I live in Moncton with my husband and my 3 kids, 13, 7th grade, 9, 4th grade, and 2. I have 2 boys and a daughter. I grew up in Bristol. I graduated from Mausd. So did my husband. I have a doctorate degree in nursing practice. I'm a board certified family nurse practitioner. I specialize now in obesity medicine. I used to practice at Mountain Health here in Bristol. I practice primary care, and I just opened my own practice in Burlington. So personally, I'm busy with my kids. Professionally, I'm also busy, but I love it. I had some interest in the school board prior. At the same time, Bailey was going to run. Actually, she was trying to get me to run, and I just couldn't at that time. I was trying to start my practice. And so when she reached out to me, I was like, yeah, this is the perfect opportunity to just give it a test drive and see if I can commit long term. I have a little experience not sitting on a board, but collaborating and working with a board. At my previous job at Mountain Health Center, I was also the director of quality. And so I would attend those board meetings as a staff person. Any questions?
Do you have questions for us?
Probably. None, no specific questions right now. I'm sure I'll have plenty. Actually, one question I had was, is there any training or orientation?
Yeah, so the Vermont School Board Association has lots of great onboarding materials, and if we move to appoint you this evening, then I'll start sending all of that good stuff to you.
Okay.
And then we'll make sure that you have a point of contact of a board member here that you can also connect with questions that you might have in between meetings. Maybe our recent board members can speak to their experience getting up to speed. I'll just say, from what I recall, from when I was on the first joined 8 years ago, it takes a little while to get your feet under you and to see what a full cycle of board work is like, and to feel comfortable even knowing what we're talking about. But we expect and assume that's going to be the case. So even with all the onboarding materials, you'll still probably feel a little bit like a fish out of water for a while. But that's kind of to be expected. So if you're willing to just listen and also to not be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you new folks? What would you add to that?
I'm still learning.
Yeah.
It means I just did, our first monitoring report. I mean, that was all new to me, but thankfully Steve kind of took it and explained to me after hours at like 9 o'clock at night. So yeah, you can't be afraid to ask questions. And of poke and prod and just
Okay.
listen, you know.
And what are, I mean, what's the depth of involvement? So my understanding, from my little board experience is it's kind of like the 10,000-foot view. You're not getting down into the operational weeds. And oversight of and also oversight of a budget. Is it similar on the school board? Okay.
Yeah.
With few exceptions, but yeah.
Okay.
Kevin.
You can make it as involved or not that you want to, but if you want to read all the prep material and come in informed, it will take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours of time to sit down and go through things depending on what's on the agenda and that sort of thing. So, and if you don't have time, you can just write along and
Hope
Just
nobody
don't-
calls on you. Yeah.
don't say anything, and if you do say something, make it up. But I found, I don't struggle with this, but I am intrigued with the juxtaposition of how this board operates underneath this document of what's called policy governance, which really does what you say. It is driving excellence, if you will, through an administration as opposed to being the administration. And in Bristol, and probably 1 and 2 in Bristol, the select board and a lot of the town boards are not driven in that same way. So people come here and don't have the same interaction as they do if they go to their select board. And sometimes there's a certain amount of education that we have to do with people to do that, but then there's a certain frustration, if you will, on community members sometimes when they come in and conversely, it's like, okay, this isn't happening somewhere else, you know, so it's just an interesting point that kind of lays out how.
I appreciate that observation because I assumed it was the way you explained and not even recognizing that it was different at say the select board.
Yeah, not all school boards operate the same way either. So we've adopted the policy governance model. Allows us to stay above the weeds and not decide like where the dumpster goes.
Sure.
But
we do have board committees now, which there's a little more detail in those and you have to decide which of those you might want to dip your toe in.
Okay. And what are those?
So there's policy and governance, which has to do with writing policy and board operations. There's facilities, finance, and community engagement.
And so Bailey probably told you the 2 meetings a month.
Yes, Kristen did too.
Well, okay, and 1 meeting is sort of focused on committee work, and the other is, some exceptions to this, but,
Right.
and then the other is on, the board as a whole.
Okay.
What was Bailey serving on?
Community engagement. I just want to pause for a second. Vicky, is that hand up from before or is that a new question? Before, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I think we continue to try to figure out how to both stay in our 10,000-foot view, but ensure transparency and accountability, so we know a little bit enough about what's happening below, since we're accountable for that, really. Or we're asking our administrators to be accountable for that, and then we're accountable to them, or they're accountable to us. You know what I mean? So anyway, it's kind of a constant push and pull. Kristen.
So I'm still kind of sort of new-ish, not the newest of the new, but just to share my experience, my sort of onboarding, every single person on this committee is super approachable, super helpful. And if they don't know the answer to any of the questions, they definitely know who to go to. So just, sort of a little bit of a word of encouragement that everybody's approachable and friendly.
Other questions for us?
Not right now. I think I'd want to read the model, the governance model that you were talking about, and see the strategic plan and other, kind of like guiding documents that you guys use to just kind of try to ground myself and get a little bit of, and honestly, I haven't ever attended a school board meeting.
Welcome.
I haven't ever watched the recordings. I'm going to confess. So yeah, just do a little bit of homework.
So, and does anyone have any other questions or comments to share with Kylie?
Well, we should last through a 3 or 4 hour meeting. We should be able to start.
I think I can do that.
Sometimes we have chocolate. That helps. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Here is a copy of, and so this sunsets in 2024, and there's currently that's the strategic plan.
Thank you.
And that was developed right before COVID. And so things got a little bit wonky. But there's a district advisory council that is working with the superintendent and the administration. And part of that work is to kind of reboot, refine, re-energize the strategic plan.
Great.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to appoint Kylie to be the new Moncton rep to the school board. So if there's no other discussion, we'll take a vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Well, congratulations.
That's so easy.
Thank you so much for being interested in something. We really appreciate it. Yeah, we're working hard to make this a fun and sustainable role that you can play in your community. So hopefully you'll find that to be the case.
Do some form or something, right?
Yeah, so I think probably we'll need to have you go to central office and sign a form that will be notarized. Yeah.
The town clerk.
And then I will also, so that way you'll be sworn in and you'll be allowed to vote and participate as an active member in our meetings. So I will probably tomorrow get in touch with Jennifer, who's the assistant to the superintendent, to get those pieces in place, as well as getting you a board email. And then I'll also send you some orienting materials to get you started. You are welcome to stay. We do have quite a few more things on our agenda, but if you weren't intending on it being a late night, we totally understand if
No,
you
I
want to duck
was.
out now or at any
I
other
might
time.
as well start, right?
Okay, great.
I'm gonna grab my phone so I can follow the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so where are we?
First one.
All right, so we're continuing down with board management and governance, and we have 3 monitoring reports that we need to approve. So Kylie, because one of the ways we work is through the monitoring of different policies. Some of those policies are focused on the work of our superintendent, and they're called executive limitations policies. Some are focused on how we govern as a board. And under this section of the agenda that is board management and governance, the 3 policies that we are reviewing, and they're reviewed on an annual basis, those all relate to our work. And so each board member takes a turn preparing a report for the board to review. We have a chance to discuss it, and then we vote to approve it.
Okay.
Okay, so first up is the monitoring report 3.2, accountability of the superintendent. And can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
I'll second.
Kristen, okay. All right, so That was Erin who did this report?
Yes, and I got an email earlier today from Steve, and I neglected to actually put whether or not we were in compliance or not in compliance. So that, and I had nothing going on during the time we wrote this. So,
It's sort of like you hold it together during finals week and then you fall apart after.
exactly.
So then I wonder, I mean,
So
policy folks, do we table this or can we? I mean,
I will write that we're in compliance, if that
Okay.
helps people make a decision about approving it with amendment.
okay, so as you, I think you noted that too, Kevin. As you look at it or looked at it, we are saying we are compliant.
And that's true for each of the sections, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't say that I had any issue with the, you know, the tone of the report in any other sense, which just didn't see that last piece.
And were there any other comments or questions about the report? Sarah?
I don't have any comments on it. I just, can we have Erin add those pieces and put it into the consent agenda so it doesn't have to come back up for discussion on the next, for the next meeting,
Does
if
that
it's not
feel
there.
more appropriate than us approving it now? I suppose we probably.
Just change the motion, right, to approve as amended.
You can.
Approve as amended, okay. I was just checking.
I'm good with whatever folks think is the most prudent.
I would think it would be cleaner to put it on the consent agenda.
Okay. So let's have our discussion now, but we'll table the vote.
So we have an active motion.
Mhm.
I can just withdraw this.
Okay. So Steve is withdrawing the motion to approve.
I don't like a motion to table it until the
Okay,
session.
so there's a motion on the table to table 3.2. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Can I second it?
I think so. Okay, all those in favor of tabling and putting this, you want to add that you're putting it onto the consent agenda?
I don't think we need to put it on the consent agenda. I think it can go back on the agenda. We'll quickly approve it.
Okay.
That way we don't have to.
Okay, so the motion is to
Consent
table this until the January meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we'll move on to 4.3 agenda planning. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Kathy, and a second? Justin? Okay, any thoughts, comments, questions about this report? Good job. The maiden voyage.
So I've got a question about the interpretation of, where is it, 2B, I think. Yeah. So the policy language says governance education and education needed related to the ends determination. And then in parentheses by futurists, demographers, advocacy group staff, and so on, will be arranged in the first quarter to be held the balance of the year. And then in the interpretation, it talks about requiring a board design the process for members of the communities, which I don't believe the MAUSD community, it could contain the futurist demographers and all that, but I don't believe that that's the focus of that particular item. And we should be looking at as we develop the ends, engaging experts, if you will. Item A two talks about talking to the ownership. So and I started blabbed on in my report about, we didn't talk anything about experts, if you will. So I think the interpretation is a little bit off kilter for B.
Yeah, and I was explaining to Justin that the interpretations are historical. But they came about when these policies were first written.
But we can change it.
Yep.
Well, that's something that I actually want to discuss. And we don't necessarily need to do it here. I thought it'd be a great topic for the Policy and Governance Committee to go through. Is my current understanding is that the interpretation is as fixed as the policy, unless the board as a whole agrees to change the interpretation. I think you're right. There's not only this interpretation, but there's an interpretation earlier that also sort of makes a stretch from a simple sentence into a more convoluted requirement. And I don't think the requirement is out of hand. It's just that it doesn't logically link to the original policy language. But all of these interpretations are historical. They actually accompanied the policy when they were very first written back when we merged. There was an executive committee from the previous school district administration that created these policies for the new merged board. And along with the policy, they also provided an interpretation. So the interesting thing about the way these are done is that nobody would know the interpretation unless they looked at the monitoring reports. The interpretation isn't embedded in the policy itself. So it's one of the things that I'm not real excited about in the policy governance monitoring model is that interpretation lives outside of the policy in a monitoring report. And just at what stage do we reconsider it? What's the process for modifying it? That's maybe a discussion for another night.
And I agree with you, they should be locked and firm.
Yeah.
But until there's a discussion, and I'm not bringing this up to drive action tonight, I'm just bringing it up to note that it's out of sync.
Yep.
And maybe that drives a process to address those, but the term in the old country was flexible rigid, or rigid flexible. It's rigid just as long as it's enforced, but you change it based on what you want, and then it becomes locked again.
So we need to probably adopt a process to re-examine the interpretations as we're going along and figure out if we want to. I know it's
So,
part of our question.
It is one of the questions.
Is there language?
And I could note on the worksheet based upon, well, as part of our vote, our
Yes,
thumbs, that is one of the questions.
But
And so then it
that
is
specific
noted
question is whether or not there needs to be changed
today.
to the policy language, or does it also say to the?
Well, the
interpretation?
questions are, does the board find the interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no?
Oh,
Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation?
so here, that's where things get even more confusing.
Yeah, the language, okay.
Because the interpretation you're talking about is the person reporting. If they interpreted the requirement, are
Then
they
it's
are they
PhD.
reporting on it
Yeah.
faithfully? As opposed to the interpretation that's in the report, that's associated with policy. So I'm a little gray on that, just how we maneuver through that, and what's the proper way to maneuver through that.
Well, I'm gonna note all that gray
Okay,
on the worksheet.
yeah. And we can put it in the language on the monitoring report spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And we can look at it later.
That's not the. Okay,
But I will say that, what Justin and I did was applied, the evidence to how the interpretation was written.
Yep.
So if it was asking for community involvement, that's what we were looking for.
so, are we ready to do thumbs on the different questions, or are there other comments about that policy report? All right, so based on the information provided, does the board find that the interpretation is reasonable?
I mean, Barbara's confused.
I'm confused because we're saying it's not, right? Aren't we saying it's not?
We're saying that we want the interpretation is different, but this time that's the interpretation and we look for evidence
Yeah,
for that. for this
essentially
way.
what I think,
Okay.
what Chris is asking is, did the people who wrote the report interpret the requirement
Okay.
reasonably?
And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, and the data demonstrates the accomplishment of this. Okay.
Right, then there's a third question.
If not, what other evidence does the board request
I'm thinking of one more question that may be,
on the executive limitations?
Yeah.
That's what I was just looking for.
the executive limitations includes a question that says, is there a reason, does the board see a reason to for them
Doubt the
to
integrity.
change the policy?
That's on here too, later.
Yeah, see, this is where I get
I know, see, yours
confused,
is different.
because the board response has these questions, and they're different from the ones there.
That are linked in your agenda.
Every time I'm always like, which questions?
Yeah, so that's another thing to put
So
on
that's
our,
also on your list.
that should go on our list as well.
Because that would, it does make sense. Having reviewed the monitoring report, does anything you've learned make you consider whether the policy itself should be amended, revised? That next question is the interpretation of
And
the
the
policy.
interpretation.
Yeah, we could do two and break it down. It would fit nicely there.
So there's some
Okay,
real bureaucratic weeds.
okay, so in the end, shall we vote on it? All those in favor of adopting this policy, despite some of its flaws.
It's monitoring
Are you
report.
sure?
Monitoring report,
Sorry.
monitoring report. That's right, we're approving the report. Please say aye. Robert's rules are turning. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So glad we have that committee. Okay, so now we've got 4.4 school board chairs role. And was that you, Kevin? Did you do that one?
Yes,
Thank you.
I vaguely remember it.
Yeah, we moved it from last meeting because you weren't here, so. Okay, any questions or comments about that report?
I'll move to.
Oh, thank you. Can I
I'll
have a
second.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, questions or comments? Okay, I'm going with the worksheet questions then. Is there sufficient evidence to indicate compliance with the whole policy? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there any reason to doubt the integrity of the information presented?
No.
No. Having reviewed the report, does anything you've learned make you consider whether the policy itself should be amended?
No.
No.
Is the timing of the report appropriate?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of approving 4.4 school board chairs role, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving right along, we are now coming to your show, Floyd. So we have an action. We need a motion to set school choice limits. First, you want to tell us what the thinking is? Or is that you, Katrina?
Either one of us.
Okay, and then I guess we'll have a motion
I know
because
what
we'll
we
know
did
what you're
last year.
suggesting, so we won't make a motion yet.
Historically, we've had a 10 in and 10 out, which is the state minimum. We've never come up against that as a number that was not sufficient for capacity. So that would be the recommendation from our end is to 10 and 10.
So Floyd, just for folks who haven't been through this before,
Mhm.
can you explain what this is?
Sure, thank you. In Vermont, you can have school choice where districts have the ability to allow a student to go to another district, and another district has the ability to allow a student to come in. No finances transfer on that. It's just a kid for a kid
High school.
at high school level. Thank you. And that's it in a nutshell. It's just an
Does the
opportunity.
exchange have to be equal?
No.
Okay, so the recommendation is to set the school choice limit to 10.
I'll move to set the school choice limit to 10.
And may I have a second?
I second.
10 in and 10
10
out. And Kathy, was that you? Yep. Okay, any other discussion or questions?
What is the movement, you know, what's the use
2 or 3,
each way?
more out than in.
Excuse me, who made the motion? I know Kathy seconded.
Steve.
Steve, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, all those in favor of setting the school choice limit for 10 in and 10 out, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, now we are going to hear the latest on the budget and share my screen again.
I emailed it 2 ways.
There won't be the one that's tabbed. You'll have to, when you minimize, go to the email tab.
Oh, okay. Okay. B2?
Go with the next one down.
Yeah, this guy? Okay. Almost, but I gotta figure out how to.
I think there's another button on those windows
No.
that you can get them all down to almost nothing. But
Okay.
there you
Folks online, just unmute if you have a question, since I can't see you right now. Okay, thank you.
Great. We're continuing the budget development. We'll move past this title page. We know it's today. Our assumptions behind our figures currently, we haven't changed from the last time you've seen this. We're still assuming a reduction of 1 classroom teacher. The healthcare premiums are increasing at 15.9%. We received an LTW ADM, long-term weighted average daily membership. Kaylee, you'll be tested on that later.
She's not the only one that needs to.
Yeah, it's the weighted average that the state uses to give a pupil count to use the education fund formula to allow for taxing capacity. We do see an increase of 207 over the 11-21 budget presentation. That is reflective of an increase in the free and reduced student calculation. We used the one that had always been used, and now the state is using the direct certification number, which is substantially higher. It works to our advantage. And it is reflected in this going forward. The yield dropped from the last time. We were using a $9,800 tax yield. We've reduced it to 94. I think if you look at that big reduction in the tax yield and a big increase in your number of students are what level that out. It includes nearly all of our ESSER funded positions.
Well, that's a big jump.
Yeah.
And it's entirely the way that the state counts everybody in our district that has SNAP. Any of the social services on a state level that we were unable to tap into in the past. And it doesn't take, we don't have to go to the families that are returning a free and reduced form that qualifies them. So it is absolutely a big one, and that's why you see the yield drop, is that shift, though the state knew that number was coming up with the direct certification and the yield was lowered to kind of get to the same spot, Kevin.
So, the December 1st letter that came out of the tax department got a lot of press from the typical doom and gloom that it has. And what I'm seeing you put up on the screen is more favorable than it was last year. Am I understanding that right?
It's more favorable for us.
Okay. By a lot.
By a lot.
Yeah.
And this was a number that we had in the back of our head. We knew that the number we were using for the LTW ADM, we've got to come up with a better word than that. For the number of students was higher than what we presented, but we didn't know how much. We didn't know how it was going to be impacted. We could have used a best guess on a direct certification and then adjusted a number of times. And we moved in this direction one time. We also saw a small change in our English language learner weighting as well. So that helped us a little bit additionally.
Yeah, should I go
Keep
on?
going. What did we come out? What did we take out of the October draft? We reduced our transportation initial line, reflecting what our actual costs are with our new contract. We had a much better snapshot. We had to double counted a maintenance tech position. We pulled that out. We removed some purchase services under the FSA HRA admin, as we no longer have that expense. We took out 3 positions. Approximately $280,000. These were positions that we had not been able to fill for over a year. And we used those dollars to fund a portion of the ESSER funded staff that we did keep. Total was approximately $525,000 that came out. So we have a couple of options tonight. Essentially, the same spending proposal is what we saw in November, reducing by $5,000 in total expenses with the up and down. It includes a significantly larger ADM. It reflects some budget requests from the Mount A High School on some ads, and then there's some other small budget adjustments that we just kind of added and subtracted some of those items to get to the number you'll see on the next page.
What are the Mount budget requests?
There was requests for I'm never gonna get it off the top of my head.
This would
I do not
basically,
have it.
this would basically put us at nine something percent, just under the 10
Just
benchmark.
well under the 10, but that's on the, it'll be under 10 on the top line spending. The number that drives the Board of Inquisition, that 10% number
Yeah.
is reflective on your per pupil spending.
Okay,
So we're actually, when we see that number, we're in substantially better position than we were a month ago.
okay,
Because it's not on your top line expense, it's on your per pupil expense.
okay.
So items that we did add, support services for, I'm just drawing blanks, I'm sorry.
Is it like staffing? or-
Some staffing, some equipment, some supplies, some software. None of it any large items. There were a couple of items that the admin would like to add that we think we could pay for out of our fund balance coming into the end of the year, not added into the budget.
Gotcha.
So those two items,
So they're like one-time
a
things.
one-time item on the back wall of the auditorium and
Something-
volleyball nets for the new volleyball team. So rather than add those as a budget expense, we're gonna pull them out and one-time those. So we're actually looking at the same, if you go far to the right, fiscal year 25, the spending is relatively the same of what we saw last month with a 9% increase on your total expenses. Revenue remains the same. Our ed spending remains roughly the same. Our long-term weighted average rather than a reduction is an increase. From the 1810 that we were looking at, giving us 15,000 per pupil, which is a drop of 1.2% spending per pupil on the post-Act 127 spending per pupil figure, which is what we use to compare to, not the actual fiscal year 24 pre-Act 27. Kevin.
But those equalized pupil numbers are still dynamic or not?
We think that they're changeable, but not dynamically changeable. At this point, we're feeling a 1 or 2 change would be about what we'll see. And we think that some of it will be a positive upward push because of an ELL. We think that they classified some free and reduced students into the ELL, but took them out of the free and reduced, and we think they should be in both. So we think that number has an opportunity to come up by 7 or 8. We'll see what the state says.
When does the final calculation happen? Like, is it right before?
I'm not answering, last year it happened after the board voted on the budget. They continue to happen. So we picked the best we can and move forward. Last year we had a little bit of an increase in our per pupil average. Our equalized pupils, which drove our spending per pupil down a little bit, which helped our tax rate a little bit after the vote had already happened.
Yeah, and even the yield came in better.
The yield came in better, which does, and then the yield,
Knocked the taxes down
which
after
is
the
what
government
impacts
voted.
your taxes, may not come in until May.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's kind of a crapshoot.
Is that it?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, thanks.
So we're getting toward, we've got
Well, there's an
January.
option too here
Yeah.
to talk about.
So the fact that we're so under on this.
But
means
but it's not,
there's margin.
Does it give you another page?
well, so something's fun.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
With politics comes in.
using this weighting, what does it do? Back to where we were last month. If you look at 24 homestead rate, 14991.
sorry.
It's okay.
Probably just page up and page down.
Oh my gosh.
Well, just keep going.
Oh, yeah.
There
Okay,
you go.
I'm good.
So the 144,14991 is the homestead tax. From there, we took that number, the state took that number. What was the tax rate with the new weights to use what our projected homestead tax rate is at 162. Currently, a cap of 157 from the 24 actual. A CLA, which we haven't gotten any new information on that yet, so that's a most likely an impactful number. But the takeaway on this is really simple. The last two numbers, the projected property tax rate of 1.991 in the first column, and then the capped rate is 1.94. So regardless of the 1991, we will be taxed at the 19404 rate. And then that just holds through with the CLAs going out to the other towns. Having said that, whatever happens with the CLA, the cap doesn't change.
So the cap is applied further up, right?
Correct. It's applied at the
Right, so the
tax
CLA
rate.
The CLA might drop you over 5%, but that's not where it's capped.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the next slide.
Hmm.
This is always exciting.
It's very exciting. Oh, let's see what happens. if I do that.
So taking out those tax rates and bringing them out, what's the impact? At $100,000 of assessed value, it's $151.10 per $100,000 of additional tax on the assessed value. It's capped at $92.40 per 100,000. Now is where it gets fun.
So this is the,
We got some clarity. There was a question last month about whether or not and how the cap might be impacted with our income sensitive community members. And for Kylie, for you, the state, based on your income and the value of your home, there's a formula that says you will pay no more than some percentage of your income for taxes. 60% of our community pays based on that income sensitive side. The other 40% pays the top rate. Using our best snapshot of the median income from 21, our most recent average that we can draw from, with that 5% cap, reflects a $99 increase for this one particular person in our community whose wages are right on that number. It will be up or down from that, but it will also reflect a cap being applied on the taxable rate that is then used to generate the rebate amount on the state level. That's a mouthful, and we'll just, it's easier, more clear to just reflect a 5% increase based on this one particular number, knowing that there is a huge bell curve in that 60% from a very small impact on a rebate to a larger one than this.
Should we be updating our median income from 2020?
That one that's the most current one we have access to right now.
and that's household, right?
Pardon me?
Is that
Household,
yeah.
yes. Which is what the cap's based on. Go ahead. So option B, everything from option A, and we're gonna add $3.3 million into the construction services line. We delineated it as construction services, but think of it as one-time money. Only things that we would spend money on once and wouldn't have a recurring expense from it. Primarily, we'll use it for facility improvements. We can add $3.3 million and it still keeps us under the 10% per pupil, which avoids the review board and it keeps the same 5% cap as option A. When we do need to cut millions of dollars, when the 5% cap sunsets, we can cut it out of this line and not feel the loss in the services provided to the students. It will just be less money we can spend on improvements. A lot to absorb. Let's go to the next one and we'll.
Cap is for 5 years.
The cap is for 5 years. Currently, it's for 5 years. So our total expenses, $40 million plus 6 million, an 18.65% increase in what we're spending. Our revenue stays flat. Our ed spending takes a pretty good jump. Using that long-term weighted average puts us at 16,993, an increase of 1,480 or 9.55%. You'll see that we didn't stretch that out to 9.95. I sleep better with a little more of a gap in there.
Than the first draft.
And how does that impact? Well, drop to the bottom two lines, projected property tax rate of 2.21 in Bristol, 2.33 in Starksboro, with a capped rate of the same number that we saw on the previous slide. 194, 204.
Lloyd, can I ask a quick question?
Certainly.
My question is about the review board and if your budget doesn't pass, do you automatically have to go to the review board?
No, if you're the gatekeeper for the review board is a spending per pupil greater than 10%.
Okay,
So if you're projecting greater than 10%, you have to go to the review board. The fear of that is if you go to the review board and they don't give you the, yes, we're good to go with that increase, you're not subject to, you're still under the cap guidelines. If that doesn't happen, then you're paying that $2.21 or $2.33 tax rate. So that's why that 10% per pupil spending increase rate is a hard ceiling. We're not gonna dance with it.
It's like a new spending.
I
Yeah.
definitely don't want to dance with that. I also just wanted to make sure we don't dance with the review board for any reason at all. And that if a failed budget got us there, we'd be in another kind of creek, so.
Right, no, the failed budget doesn't get us there.
Okay. I'd like it to pass.
So moving forward. Impact, the blues on the far right, the change per 100,000 of assessed value in taxes. $388 versus the were we 150, 160 previous, but the capped rate change stays the same.
So this essentially is doing what the law was intended to do, which was allow us the room to spend more money based on the new wave.
To some degree, I think
It's a little bit of a shell game, but in the end,
we'll be forced into that same position. Back to Kevin's comment when we started with the December 1 letter that came out the governor came out with a broadside saying this is moving against affordable. And I would argue that to a large degree that is completely accurate on the governor's end. And if we don't take advantage of this, and every other board in the community, state does, we're gonna pay for it with no benefit.
So this is a bond alternative.
This is better than a bond. We don't have to pay interest.
Right.
free money.
Yes.
It's
Free money.
This is brilliant. What it is.
First you applaud, or he gets an applause, and now he's brilliant.
My head will never leave the room.
We're very glad you get through the door tonight.
Did
Well,
you tell Patrick to take the long way home so you could be the one to deliver this?
I'm surprised he's not listening.
I think he might.
I think he is too.
I
He
think he
just
is.
hasn't heard anything he doesn't like yet.
Is that the last?
Yeah, go ahead to the next, which then, again,
Same.
the cap doesn't change for those, for the bulk of our community paying based on income.
Why wouldn't you spend it?
So that's the next slide. Take option B, we can address facilities need. We'll have 3.3 million plus the 2.2 million we have in our construction line to be able to do some serious amount of work in the next 3 years. And it's not ESSER money, so if we can't spend it in the time frame, we have the ability to move it into the capital reserve and then leave it for the board to direct in a future budget cycle, or move it into the ed reserve and or some portion of it. You have options where it goes. We have a number of different items, different ways we could use it, depending on what the board sees the best use of that money on the back end. Initially, our view is to spend the money on facility improvements because it's not going to be cheaper than it is this year.
Yeah.
And then when the cap sunsets, we just remove those funds out of the one-time money that we've added to the construction services. It'll be easy to see it. It'll be very transparent to the board, to the community, with what we're doing with this opportunity or shell game, depending on where you're sitting. I don't mean to be flip about it, but we have a tremendous opportunity here to impact and impart some strategic changes to our facilities in an interest-free structure.
So basically, even with the increase in the ADM, we were still bumping up against the 5%.
We were already there.
That didn't help us.
All that does is help us if we decide to go down option A, but it doesn't help us. We're still at 5%. It just makes the gap lower, but we don't have any money to work with on the back end anyway.
Right, we're just not over it as much.
Correct.
As in option B.
Right. I think
So
that's
you might as well
the,
go all the way if you're gonna go part way.
you can't half dive into the pond. And our recommendation is no toes, go. This
I
is,
think the only struggle is trying to explain this.
Explain it, right.
Explain this kaleidoscope to the public.
which is why we're so dang glad we have a communications committee.
We don't have a communications
A
committee.
community engagement committee. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Sarah, is your hand up anew or is that from before?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it really comes just communication and trying to explain why that the number is so gigantic and that, you know, what we're getting for it. We've talked about it a little bit with the finance committee, so just knowing that this option could be coming out there, and I think we are trying to figure out how to get the right voice out there and the right explanation out there. And so Mike and Brad and I definitely are going to need a little bit of, well, we're happy to do a little bit of the legwork, obviously, but we're definitely going to need the board behind us when we for whatever decision we opt for to communicate this, because it's an interesting sell. I don't know that it's always going to be a tough sell, but I don't know how hard, it's a hard sell to explain.
Mike, did you have your hand up or was that, no? Okay.
how hard to sell it is. You're basically not gonna, you say these taxes, you're gonna get $3 million extra.
Right. But the fear is that it sounds too good to be true.
It does.
Yeah,
Right,
it does.
yeah, that's.
Right? Who doesn't feel that way?
Where's the rabbit hole?
Right.
Where's the-
Well, and I think it's important for us to keep in mind also that we have this vote for central office to kind of explain to folks and to incorporate into this bigger picture. So we have, I think it's important to set context for all of these pieces and how does $3 million in facilities fit into that or not? And I don't know where that conversation is about how we're gonna start. I think we talked about that being facilities and finance committee
Sure.
having those conversations.
And I think it's very important that we don't talk about, we have to talk about the $3.3 million of additional spending we can make with no additional hit to our taxes. But it's really $5.5 million of construction service line. Because we have 2.2 in there now.
Mhm.
This 3.3 is adding to that.
Well, plus what we have in the capital reserve.
Capital reserve, yeah, without even talking about our savings account.
So you have the capacity to spend that?
Well, that's the beauty of this, is if we can't spend it, we roll it into the cap reserve, and then we can spend it in a wise way. I mean, I don't think there is no desire to go spend it just because we have it. Let's be strategic on what we need, back to the facilities planning and plugging in those items. The beauty of this money is you can do those infrastructure items that nobody sees. You know, you go spend 1.3 million on the electrical upgrade, nobody knows, the plugs all look the same, but we just spent 1.3 million of capital. Those are the sort of items that will be unbelievably valuable to the person who replaces the person that replaces me. If we can buy some of those items with this opportunity.
All right, this is a side topic, but are we also looking for voter approval on spending some of the capital reserve this coming session?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
No, so you need to touch that?
Nope. No.
Sarah?
We often hear about this is what we have to do because this is what's gonna happen next year. And since I'm just clarifying, is next year so uncertain that it doesn't matter? Because that's why the point is for the one-time money, so that, or like, is the percentage increase based on this year? You know how there's always these weird things, like we got to do this because then the cliff is in 2 years and then this is.
It's that whole conversation where we as a group have been talking about the declining enrollment, its impact, and the sky is falling, right? And then now we're sitting here talking about, hey, we've got an extra $3.3 million. You think I don't feel like Chicken Little right now?
Just because of what the legislature.
Right.
It's been that way all along.
Right,
We try to do all this planning and then the legislature just waves their hands and it's suddenly a different picture.
Yeah.
You know,
But over the next 5 years, escalation will probably eat into that 3.3 million.
I would expect it will. And that would be the plan the whole way, is to be at that point in 5.5 years, to where we can come out of that with a reasonable tax increase reflective of what the community supports, with spending that reflects that. And I would say that 5 years from now, everything we're planning for today with that in mind won't be on the table. It's no different than what we've looked at for the last 5 years now. It's always been different than what we thought it was going to be, because the legislature helps us.
is this opportunity going to be the same next year?
That's a Vegas question.
I mean, if they didn't change anything legislative.
If they didn't change anything legislative, yeah, we would do this again next year.
You'd have 3.3 million minus the cost of money.
Right.
And then the next year after that, it'd be 2.89 million plus the
Right.
cost. of
But
money.
you would have an increase in your per pupil spending. Because that number will come up a little bit, which then feeds that 9.5. So next year we go 9.7 and the following year we go 9.6. I mean, that you play with that at a point where Sarah's still comfortable and take advantage of what we can in that spending opportunity. And we have no idea what's gonna happen when the legislature comes back in this year.
Right. See what kind of, see what they've wrought.
Yes.
Mike, so.
Yeah, perfect. So in general, I think I'm really strongly in favor of the second option. The only hesitancy I see or the thing that we need to make sure that we can really explain is how we absolutely can't get under 5% spending increase to begin with, right? Because I could imagine that if there was a scenario where we could come up with a budget alternative that didn't hit that cap initially, that you could have a budget that didn't have a 5% increase in taxes, and then you wouldn't have this opportunity for the increase in excess funds. And I think there are a lot of reasons why that's a problem overall. One, I think it's not particularly feasible. Two, it doesn't give us this option for the cap moving forward. It's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table. That might only be over a percentage or two, even in best case scenario. I just bring this up to suggest that while it's super exciting to think about this opportunity, in the context of messaging, I think we have to be really clear with that first level that there really isn't flexibility there if we want to sort of fulfill the aims of the district. And if we can establish that, then everything else is found money. And I think that's an easier sell. If we can't establish that first part or establish that within the community at large, then I think you run into more trouble with acceptance of this.
Yeah, I agree with that. What is the financing plan, post financing plan for the central office? Cash. Straight out of where?
We have almost $1 million, or we've earmarked still in this year, fiscal year 24, and $1 million out of 25.
Out of the construction?
Not $1 million, out of that construction line. Yeah, so 600 done. No financing.
So that doesn't really even play a part in it.
No, and if this all goes forward, there would be, then it becomes the facility committee. What can we do at year end with that money that we've kind of earmarked for this purchase? Or if the vote is no, what do we do with that money? Or do we just roll it into the reserve fund for use in a future year?
Do we have to vote for it? Do we need a vote for that purchase?
No, because that would be, yes, the vote on the purchase, yes, that's happening in March. That's already moved through the board to bring that to a vote, but yes.
Sorry for my ignorance, but
No.
Is it required to go to the voters to purchase real estate? Is that?
Yes,
Yes.
that's why we have to.
I was thinking that since we weren't bonding, why are we voting on anything?
So, we're at 8:34. And I'm trying to get us to move ahead, but with a clear sense of next steps. We will be seeing this budget one more time in January, at which time we need to vote to warn it. And so there are a couple things I'm thinking about. One is, again, back to how we're going to talk to the community, not just about the budget, but the central office piece. And I'm wondering what the Facilities and Finance Committee think about having a joint meeting on the 9th to talk through that. And to come to the full board meeting on the 20, whatever it is, I think it's the 23rd, with a plan for that or a recommended plan for that education. I also was wondering, Floyd, do you need us to tonight say yes, option B, or are we? No, okay.
I'd be surprised
It's not an action
if
item.
we did anything more than what we just did.
Okay.
Did, is there any, waving around of the possibility of option B in that public forum that you guys had?
It was before that.
And as a group that Patrick and I were at a meeting with superintendents, business managers and the state. And that conversation in the room, everybody is fully aware of this and how it can impact them positively or not. You know, there's some that aren't gonna, that don't have the window we do. And the consensus is if you don't do it, you're going to pay for it.
You're gonna be the contributor.
So I just also want to add, you know, I think this is me as board member, not chair, and me with my own voice, just thinking about what we heard earlier. And I appreciate the value of one-time money going to facilities, but I'd also like to suggest that there's some directly impactful ways we can use that money for students specifically. And that oftentimes that's in a salary position that isn't a one-time money. But you know, we might also consider whether we want all of that money to go to facilities or some of it to go toward consultants to help us with equity planning work. So I think as for me personally, it's important that as we speak about what we're doing with this grand influx of money, that there are folks that are going to be interested in, but not as many, I think, are going to be interested in the cap and the, you know, they're going to want to know how this is impacting students. So being really flash and putting it all toward facilities doesn't help tell that story.
I think I use facilities in the example and really read that to be items that aren't recurring costs. Right? So if it's a consultant that's gonna allow us a dynamic change, I would look at that in that same capital investment as I would in new stairs or another elevator.
I think that's an important, if that's the case, I think that's an important distinction to make.
Sure.
For me, it's entirely about doing as much as we can not to bring it into the budget and make it be an escalator going forward.
Right.
Because that's gonna be the hard one to pull out later. But if it's just okay, well, we don't hire the consultant again this year, well, that fits in that model pretty well.
What are our levers as a board for input around what that $3 point whatever million, how that would be spent?
It's a negotiation with Patrick question. So I get my marching orders from the corner office.
I think it's something we should think about. Yeah, not that we are getting into the weeds, but that we have some connection that we're making toward our ends. Sarah?
So our facilities group kind of had a meeting scheduled for not facilities, finance, sorry. About kind of communicating with the community and just getting feedback prior to the meeting on the 20 something odd. So I just wanted, I don't know if that's still on, Mike and Brad, I'm looking around, but or if that's what everybody wants us to do, is to kind of keep, you know, we had that one session with the community prior to this information. Do people still want like us to go back into the community? And is it about trying to get information from the community or feedback, or is it about us trying to communicate our decision making? And so I think we need to know that.
You can segue into that next.
Okay, shall we? Go to committee updates. So first is facilities committee, but you folks did not meet, is that right?
We did not meet.
Okay. Okay, so we're on to the finance committee.
Well, in an ideal world, we'd cover both of Sarah's bases, but time is running short. That's one thing to consider, but I would think you'd want to try to educate and get feedback.
I think the education is very important. I'm not sure about the feedback. I sat in on the finance committee meeting that they had seeking input. The input they got was very siloed. It was very backwards looking as far as where this district needs to go. You know, the discussion was town budgets, or some comment was the budget for a given town elementary school should be in the town report. So I'm not sure how much input. I mean, you always want to hear, and I don't want to necessarily downplay that, but based on the commentary in that input session, unless somebody else comes, you're gonna find regressive comments and not forward thinking.
I think to be fair, Kevin, though, that at that meeting, there were some comments like that, but the 90% of the discussion, during the session was about, digging into the Levinson report and trying to find savings through the Levinson recommendations. Yes, there were a couple of comments about, this business of having the principals deciding how much is going to be spent in the schools, but it was pretty limited.
The Levinson report is most of the stuff in the Levinson report, probably 70–80% of it has either been said no by the community or is being delayed. So we're down to chicken feed basically out of that Levinson report. So yeah, there was a lot of commentary about how great that report is, but there's nothing left in that report that's will move the needle.
I think what's important is for us to figure out, it is hard for a community member to give meaningful feedback on a really complicated budget. And so I think we have to figure out where are the places where their feedback can be considered in a way that's meaningful. And I'm recalling the survey from the fall that Patrick did, where it's really thinking about vision and ends related bigger picture efforts, and then that helps drive the direction. And then we're sort of the intermediary of determining, are we spending our money in a way that is then, monitoring how well we're spending that money in a way that's meeting the community's wishes towards the end. So feedback is tricky, but I think engagement is really important, or education is really important. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Sarah.
I just wanted to add that one of the best things that came out of the fact that we were trying to really engage with the community, even if it's not a giant attendance, was sorry, Mike's presentation, and Mike's voice and ability to explain it was very, very valuable. And our goal with our meeting that we had set up initially was to work on another kind of explanatory, video that could go out through Front Porch Forum on our website, information that way to get these people a little more educated on the earlier side. And so if that still is something we can consider doing, we would be interested in doing that. But we also think that we're going to get the right kind of information back potentially from the community if we do it sooner rather than later, so it could kind of be acts in both ways. But that would be our reason for wanting to still kind of meet started. But if the group doesn't want us to do that, we won't, I guess is what we're saying.
Well, personally, I'm in favor of as much community feedback and education as possible within the time frame you have.
I don't want to sound like I'm rating on the parade, Mike. I mean, I agree with you, Sarah. Mike did an excellent presentation and fielded questions very well. I'm just frustrated that the level of vision is not always there when you're engaging the public. And it's probably, while I don't want to downplay input, it's probably more important to educate than it is input.
It's also pretty short notice, that meeting.
Well, and I think, we're new to the committee structure. I think this is only going to get more proactive and timely. So,
Yeah, we could set a lot of this stuff up
Yeah.
early in September and have it all penciled in.
Mike,
next time around.
sorry, Steve.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick because I'll be cognizant of time, but I think, we're happy to continue sort of educational efforts and whatever feedback may come. To that end, as I think about what we might be able to present in light of today, we could sort of mirror the presentation in some sense and give sort of option A and option B, and that might be sufficient. But that said, if there is a building consensus on the board already towards one way or the other, it might be useful to be able to indicate that earlier on, right? I feel like we might feel and find ourselves in a strange position where we present this information and then attendees say, okay, and which one? And they say, and then I don't want to speak out of turn, right, on behalf of the board if we don't actually have a sense from the board. So I guess it's an ask of whether we think we're at that place, and I should include that. Or if not, I just want to know that clearly so I can articulate that at whatever educational sort of outreach we do. Because I don't want to be in between, because I think that doesn't serve the role very well.
I think if Patrick was probably here, he'd probably give the same opinion. He'd probably like to know the board's opinion.
So would it be helpful to do a little straw poll? Okay. So if folks are in support of option B, put your thumb up. Okay, so that looks like that's where we're leaning.
Thanks. That's helpful.
How we spend it, a big TBD.
Excuse me. Do you guys feel like you have enough to go on for next steps?
So I guess I
I mean, I
got.
think we, sorry, go ahead. Kevin.
No, go ahead. So you had mentioned before we'd have a joint facilities finance committee meeting on the first Tuesday,
That was a suggestion.
second Tuesday or whatever it is, second. I believe we would be very interested in that because we were gonna talk about, how to present central office, and if it can be combined, it makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kathy, do you?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So if the three of us meet, like our finance committee meets a little bit in advance and kind of get something started, is that gonna work, or should we wait until we are with the facilities committee?
Maybe you guys could figure out what makes the most sense. Yeah, and I think, as long as we have a good idea of what the engagement will look like when we get to that January meeting, that would be great. I'm not answering your questions.
Well, we're gonna start with something that's can be distributed, so we don't have the same 10 people showing up. We want to have get our voice out there in that, that gets sent with, even if it's not very long, but like, this is where we're headed. And so it's not, the people aren't hearing it for the first time in February, that they're hearing it now. And so if we say, this is kind of where we're leaning and why, like, this is a good time to give us feedback. If you think this isn't, if you're confused, or you think you need, more information about like that, we want to get that part started because we think it will help us. But
So Sarah, when were you thinking of presenting to the community?
well, this wasn't going to be in a in-person presentation. This was going to be kind of, we originally wanted to send out the film piece, or the clip from Mike's presentation with a follow-up form, but in light of the information of the 16-letter student increase number, and that there was a potential for some massive budget shifting, we opted not to send that out. So we were then going to kind of recreate it in a way that would maybe provide an educational opportunity and also an opportunity for some feedback, but with more current information. So that was really where we were headed. Am I wrong, Mike and Brad? Okay. So that's it. We weren't really trying to have another in-person meeting. It was more like, okay, this was to give out to the population after we just had one. And it's hard to fit that all in.
Right, so when are you thinking that you would want to do that?
We have a potential meeting scheduled, the three of us, on Mike. Do you remember?
January 4th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking, when are you expecting to put this out to the public?
Shortly thereafter was the idea, and I think Sarah's raising the question of whether that rollout should be coordinated with facilities, so that information sharing also includes a heads up about the vote for purchasing the building, or whether we should roll out the information purely about the budget as sort of we had intended, and then bring in the facilities piece as that moves forward. I think that's maybe where the uncertainty lies.
It just seems as though if we're going to be presenting to the public on big issues like this, we need to be transparent across the board. And the sooner that we get all the information to folks, it doesn't feel like we're hitting them over and over and they're waiting for the next shoe to drop. Here's what we're saying. This is the message, and just do it in one, do it together, I think would be the best option.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think our only concern was the speed at which the process moves, where the 23rd is sort of our final, like, proposed budget, at least my understanding. So there's not a lot of time between, say, the 9th, or even the 4th for that matter, and when that budget actually comes forth. So we would just have to move quickly after the 9th, I guess, is the short version of this.
But drag this out a little bit. Logistically, does the facilities committee open to meeting on the 4th?
I'm not available on the 4th.
Yeah. We would have a quorum, unfortunately, with one member missing.
I mean, alternatively, you could have the finance committee get their piece together and then have that for you for your meeting on the 9th.
Well, I think they want to do it on the 4th so they can get it maybe even out before the 9th.
Oh. Well, I'm gonna ask you guys to figure out this piece.
Okay, yeah.
Could you do this piece of it separately? Okay, great. All right, thanks. Yeah, it's a lot and we're scrambling a little, but I appreciate the effort and I think it will get more smooth in the future. Okay, we do have an action item from the finance committee, which is to accept their recommendation of a new pay order approval process. So if I can have a motion, and then maybe someone from that committee can just describe what the proposed plan is.
So I'll make the motion to accept their recommendation.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Who would like to speak to this from the committee?
I'll go very briefly. Basically, this came out of a recommendation, I think, from Floyd and from Patrick, and some concerns that were raised by the board at large, which was just the how slow it is to get every single board member's signature on these pay orders, coupled with the idea that that step is really the last step in a really lengthy process where MASD staff are really doing the heavy lifting to ensure that money is being spent how it's supposed to be and being allocated to the right places. And it sort of felt like getting every board member signature was a little bit performative and actually taking a lot of extra time. And so as a way to maybe reduce some of the expectations for the board overall, we're just proposing that the finance subcommittee does those signatures initially, so the committee itself, not going directly to the full board directly. And then we will sign off on those, and then they'll be part of a future consent agenda. So the whole board has an opportunity to review them as they see fit, but they don't have the expectation that they have to sign off every single time.
But can I add the
Yeah.
piece that the finance committee would be reviewing those pay orders for accuracy, continuity, all of that, and then holding the admin team their feet in the fire with any questions should something come up. So that piece, I think, is really important for the board to recognize that the finance committee is going to be paying attention to those pay orders.
Does anyone have any questions or comments about this new process?
I greatly appreciate your efforts. And I would move the question.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, all those in favor of accepting this recommendation for a new pay order approval process, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hooray, it's passed. Okay, so we have a couple of other committee updates, one from the Policy and Governance Committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments for that group? Okay, we have one from Community Engagement. Okay. Also, we have an update. We included the link to the letter that was written on behalf of the board in support of our superintendent. And then he drafted or he responded to that letter. And so we're including that here. So it's part of our record, our public record, and included in the minutes. And if you haven't had a chance to read Patrick's response, you can do that by clicking on the link.
I'm a little curious. Did we share this publicly in the past?
We had a statement that was made that was very vague and just, it was a vague statement that was pulled from the letter.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Patrick and I said, I was trying to write this statement and I just thought, why wouldn't we share this letter? If is he comfortable with that? He said yes. So I took the confidentiality out of there, that word. Yeah, it just seemed like it did a nice job of really explaining why we were in support, and I thought folks might appreciate that.
Be sure that Patrick was okay. because
Yes,
it's
he got, yes, I checked it.
personal-
No,
Personal,
yes, but it provides good evidence for why we are,
no, I agree.
so. Okay, so moving on, we have an action item to set the tuition rate. So I'll take a motion for that and then we can hear a little bit more about that. Or wait, no, we don't know what we're setting it to. So Floyd, do you have some information for us on that? Okay.
Or we're looking at, we need to have an announced tuition by January 15th. This board meeting is the one that fits for us to have this conversation. An announced tuition is letting any school district with students coming to our school know what we estimate we're going to be charging for tuition in the next year. So we've taken and taken our budget for next year. We pulled out construction services for tuition purposes and have come up with two numbers. K through 6, and then 7 through 12 for your consideration for approval. And there's room to you true it up at the end of the year. So we present this to the districts, and in our case, substantially Lincoln. And then as the numbers finalize at the end of the year, you true up to make it fair, reflect the accurate tuition costs for the sending school. So those numbers are for elementary school, $20,542. For the secondary school, $21,441. Both of those reflect announced tuition increase that's reflective of the NEAT, the New England average change, to give us an estimate to start with going forward.
Okay, so then we need a motion to set the tuition rate for K through 6 at $20,542, and the tuition rate for 7 through 12 at $21,441.
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second it, Barb.
Okay, any discussion? You've wowed us into silence. All right, all those in favor of setting those tuition rates as stated,
Have no response.
please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? My jokes get worse as the night goes on. I'm so sorry.
I
I'm
still
so
look
sorry.
forward to 10
Oh,
o'clock.
goodness. Hopefully we're not here at 10. Okay, all right, we have the financial report.
Oh.
Does anyone have any questions for Floyd? Okay, and the superintendent's report?
I have one question about the financial report.
Oh, okay.
Only in that, I'm assuming the finance committee is reviewing these.
Finance committee, are you reviewing the finance reports? No.
Sort of curious why that wouldn't be like the first.
Job one.
Job
Job
one on
one.
there.
As you're saying it out loud, I'm going, why aren't we?
Job
You know, I
one
mean,
on their
that's
agenda is
a-
to look at that and,
So
Spend a
should
few
they
minutes on
maybe
that.
go first to the committee?
yeah, I'm
So
interesting.
an early report, early in the month, I think we can get those statements done for that first meeting of the month for the board, for the finance committee. I'm certainly willing to do that, make that work if the committee is interested in looking at it.
What do you folks
That's
think?
fine. I think that was what our goal was.
Yeah, we had talked about this.
Perfect.
You know, and our organizational. So I think it's time to operationalize it.
Okay, great.
I fully support it.
Okay, anything else on that report? Okay, and anything on the superintendent's report?
Great as ever.
Yes.
Yep.
Very happy with
That's
those.
very good, yeah.
Okay. Do we have any folks still with us from the public? No. So we do not need public comment again. All right, we need to do our meeting evaluation.
We have it up.
Okay, Erin.
Level of engagement of all board members, I put high. Agenda followed, I said yes with some small adjustments to ensure all items were met on time, specifically the Career Center presentation. Any other comments about the agenda? Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board?
Yeah.
Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of board process?
Yeah.
Other feedback for chair?
Good job. Great job commanding a room full of
Good job.
A lot of people.
Thanks to all of you for doing that with us.
What went well with the meeting?
Public comment area discussion.
I'm impressed with the timing.
When you
Like-
saw the amount of people, you weren't sure we'd still get out of here at 9:05, were you?
Hmm.
I'm excited.
Well,
to
I
go.
saw the
Remember.
two-page agenda.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah,
Very nice to have that seat filled
yes.
quickly.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
doing
Thank
that.
you. Anything else on that?
Suggestions for ways to improve future meetings.
Okay. All right, then we just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Aaron, and a
Second.
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 Okay. All those in favor of adjourning at 9:06, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Happy holidays, everybody.